Spiritual Principles, Rabbi, Michael-ben-Pesach, Portnaar. The 20th Spiritual Principle. Separation in the spiritual only happens because of the differences in properties, while similarity in properties attracts one to the other. However, you should know that separation in the spiritual does not occur otherwise, but only because of the difference in properties. Thus, if one spiritual object acquires an additional form that differs from the form that it has, then this spiritual property transforms from one to two separate properties, removed from one another due to the difference in essence of these two forms. And just as material objects move away and move closer by moving away from the place or approaching the place, so are spiritual objects separated, moving away, moving closer, and joined by difference or correspondence in properties, so that the difference in properties separates and removes one object from another, and the similarity of properties brings them together, and this connects the objects. Remember this, and this is the first key to the wisdom of Kabbalah. For the whole separation in the spiritual is because of the differences in properties, and every spiritual connection is the same, correspondence by the properties. And so, if, for example, one light is dressed in stage 4, and the second light is dressed in stage 3, then they are counted as two, because of the difference in properties, that is, in them divides them, and is considered that these two lights divide themselves into two kelim. But at the moment, when the kli of stage 4 was thinned and remained as stage 3, for example, stage 4 thinned to stage 3, then the two kelim join to become one kli, for both are in the same equivalent property. And also, two lights, they are included into each other in their luminescence, despite the fact that from the side of their exit, where they come from, the aspect of 10 sferot of direct light, they are two different types. For example, one type is ruach and the other is nefesh. The aspect of the spiritual distinction is because of the difference in properties that appeared there, was updated, literally. And each, which is higher than the other, that is thinner than the other, and each which is lower than the other, this means that it is more coarse than the other. For by the difference in the properties of this aviyut, it is separated and comes out of one another and becomes lower than it. And it is known that the light is given from each upper to the lower, and therefore the lower is obliged to receive abundance from the higher to a more subtle degree than it has, and the upper gives them this abundance only in the aspect of the lowest and the coarsest, which is in it, that thus the coincidence of the properties of the light coming from the higher to the property of the kli, which is in the lower, is obtained. For the thickest and coarsest aspect that is in the higher, by correspondence in properties with the subtle aspect that is in the lower. And it turns out that the lower one cannot receive all the light that relates to it, intended for it to receive, but only a very small part from it, as far as the thinnest kli in it can receive. And the other steps that are in it, which are not so thin, they must be left without light relating to them, due to the difference in their properties with respect to the top one, which gives them the spiritual. In the spiritual, everything rests on the principle of correspondence in properties or separation by the differences in properties. Take, for example, the feeling of being alone. When does loneliness arise? Of course, due to the malfunctioning kelim. When a person breaks away by properties, he is separated from the Creator and Yeshua. He is cut off from the feeding from the upper light, the love of the Creator. When a person feels loneliness, he shouldn't cry. He shouldn't look outside for someone or something to defeat that feeling of loneliness that torments him and puts pressure on him. But he should be grateful at this moment that he was given the feeling of uncorrectedness from the above. And this is great, giant help from above, in that he now has a place to work. And this is the moment he should try to get away from loneliness. Go to a friend, have a drink, have sex, etc. Instead, he should rejoice at this state and work on it and study what helps him. Zohar, other things that we study, and do the work inside of himself. For he should not try to get away from his loneliness, but work with it, work on it. Do not leave this state of loneliness hiding it deep inside of yourself. Do not press it down, but work on it until it disappears. And it will disappear only when he establishes his connection with the higher. And all the same principles that we are studying here. Similarity by the properties connects spiritual objects. The differences in properties separates them.